I must remind you I'm not Sam Smith, the singer, and I'll save you all from my singing because it's not great. Kelly has grown up, and in fact we've evolved. William Russell Kelly, our founder, back in 1948, the first Kelly girl was a lady called Janice, a lady that he loaned to a banking friend whose secretary hadn't turned up to work. And so the staffing industry was born, and over time we've moved into an outsourcing organisation and connect people to work. And a huge part of that is residing within life science and healthcare. Let's see if I can get this right. Have I? There we are, look at that. That's called Photoshop, for anyone that gets too close to me. I'm a mechanical engineer by trade, so I'm not a scientist. That's probably very evident because I can't say the words you say, and my language skills are limited to mechanics. More specifically, I was an aviation engineer focused on transmission. But what I can say is I moved people around and got them to where they wanted to be in helicopters. And my claim to fame is working with the Queen and Princess Diana, so I know most Americans love the crown. So hopefully that stands me in good stead. So I wanted to share with you our mission statement, and I want to explain why this was so important to me. Primarily because when we sit with customers, we need to deal with the diversity and inclusion conversation very quickly. And we need them to understand how we approach connecting talent to work and how we want them to approach connecting talent to work. And there are many large corporations across the world that think they do a really amazing job. And because they think they do a really amazing job, they don't realize they have a problem and they don't want to admit that they have a problem. And if they do have a problem, they want to find a technology solution, not a human solution, to fix the problem, because it's cheaper. But it doesn't always work, because as we know, any technology solution, when you involve masses of humans, requires data in. And when you don't think there's a problem, the data that goes in it's not so great. So the problem perpetuates and continues. So we created our mission statement to focus on being human, being brave, and being inclusive, and pushed inclusivity at the front. Whereas most organizations talk about D&I, we talk about inclusivity, full stop, and then help the diverse element or the diversity element follow on from that naturally. Now Dr. Mae Jemison has already been noted today. I didn't know she was a dancer, so I've learned something new today. But I won't read the quote for you, but I think what we all know is that there is an element of creativity and surprise in us allowing and forcing women to not only lead the path and walk the path that has already been trodden, but also have the bravery to pull other women through. And I often say, if you see your goal ahead of you, grab another woman, pull them through and push them forward. You're still going to achieve getting to your goal, but you can help somebody else along the way, and it takes nothing for you to do that. So what's our business? What are our customers saying keeps them up at night? Well, many things, but access to talent is a huge part. And I noted earlier in the panel discussion and other talks, there's lots of conversation around the fact that the pipeline's okay. Where, yes, in some cases, but the job requirements that are coming through business with the evolution of how business is being done and how work is getting done and how new products are being developed to R&D, clinical, that whole piece is driving a huge level of volume across the entire talent landscape. And not all of that can be done by machines or bots or automation. So what we've got to do is try and understand how we can get from the learning to earning piece. And I think that's where we see there's often a gap. And employers tell us that's where they see the gap, where they can't bridge the gap. Their outreach programs aren't doing a brilliant enough job. They're going into schools and encouraging particularly young girls, to take STEM subjects, but they're not then following up. So the entrustment, if it's even a word, of that middle ground is going to whom? We're not sure anybody's owning that middle ground. So they're really struggling. 28% of STEM workers are women. And we know that can be much higher. We know there are more women out there with STEM capabilities and qualifications and aspirations, by the way, but we also know there are huge areas of underrepresented groups. We also know, and I'm very passionate about this area, that there are rock stars sitting at home with huge capability that don't get access to grants and don't get access to education opportunities because of their personal demographic situation. And we're trying to find ways to connect more corporations to help fund more of those young people, particularly children with bright futures that are shadowed by their own economic situation. We know that Black and Latino women represent fewer than 1 in 20 employed scientists and engineers. That's a tragic statistic. It's something that really concerns us. But then the middle ground, you say, well, what's happening about that? There are programs and there are schools initiatives and there are education initiatives, but the traction is not happening at a pace that is quick enough to impact what's happening in the world of work. And if it's not going to impact it, that journey between people getting to management and leadership levels is never going to catch up. And our primary customers, those in multi-country, global, complex business organizations, are really trying to figure out what they can do about that. And they're asking for help, but I don't know whether they're asking the right people for help. We know women make up 35% of STEM graduates. Okay, that's improved and it's improving. But then what happens? 52% of STEM-trained graduates are working in STEM. So there's people that choose to step off the ladder, okay, for lots of reasons. But there are also people that fall off the ladder, people that don't transition from earning to learning for whatever reason. And we want to try and catch those people and understand why, so we can support them in making a choice. Because often we don't think there's a choice. So people are falling back into other career options that maybe have an easier pathway for them, or maybe have a different pathway that accommodates how they want to go to work or how they need to go to work to take into account their personal situation. 45% of women are more likely to leave the STEM field than men. Well, yeah, I think that's, duh, they're gonna. Women have babies and men don't. Of course, not all women have babies. I have a child, but I didn't have a baby. Thanks, science. That was great, but also really bloody expensive. So the Moore's Law thing, if someone can fix that, folks like me will have a much better pension pot, which got eaten away with IVF treatment. There are some natural fall-offs that are going to impact these statistics, and we understand that. But again, these are points that large organizations that we're working with across the globe are saying, well, we know these are the issues, but what can we do to help either reverse the trend, reverse engineer better practices, better HR policies, better parental leave, better flexible working, allow people to work from home if they can. If they don't need to be in a lab all the time, why do we insist on people making a 45-minute commute each way when they have children to pick up from school? Why do we insist on holiday periods being fixed? And why do we not have more flexibility in how we give people access to the work that they need to get done? There is no reason for an 8 till 5, 7 till whenever work day when you look at how we operate with technology, how communication works, how the Internet of Things works for every organization and practically every household. Although we go back to the economic demographic issues where we know that there are some young girls and boys who don't have access to 4G. They don't have access to the internet. They can't do basic applications. So we need to ensure that we can get them to a place where they can, where they can be supported. 88% of the authors of 4,000 key research papers in 2017 were men. And you know, I watch the Twitter. I watch your Twitter feed quite often, and you know, I saw the Nobel Prize list, and you think, how can that be so in 2019? You know, how can it be so that these women are invisible, and how can it be so that women don't feel they have permission, or those around them don't feel they have permission to post that application or have the support for the application? But it is there, and it happens all the time, every day, in micro scenarios, and then those macro situations that then leave us all scratching our heads. And the micro scenarios are, you know, bonkers. You know, that's just a guy walking in front of you in the line, right? And you kind of go, well, I'm in a line, and I know I'm British and I really love queuing, but I'm in a line. Dude. But, you know, that's life, and that's what happens. They're cutting in the line, and, you know, we do need to kind of call that out, but have permission to do that, give ourselves permission, and, you know, absolutely increase the numbers of papers, because that will increase the amount of funding and visibility and have such an amazing knock-on effect. It will start perpetuating a really different scenario for women in the field. So what's the reality? Well, I don't need to tell you the reality because you're living it. But this is research, this is studies, this is what's powering the decision-making of the HR community, particularly, and the C-suite within organisations to try and adjust their working practices to be much more female-friendly. But you can see that bias is an issue, conscious or unconscious. And this goes back to my point earlier, where people don't think they have a problem. It's where the problem is, and it's the biggest problem. Now, some organisations are doing fantastic work. No job descriptions are posted in some organisations without them going through a bias process to ensure that they are not targeting males. However, when you really get down to it, and a point on an MIT study actually, when you look at algorithmic bias or gender bias, when you look at how you create that story or that job posting, it's still not going to drive more female applicants. Why? Because it's more costly to get that advertisement in front of a female audience because they operate in a different way. So you still have bias, but it's consumer-led bias because the job posting isn't getting to the right people, because consumer-led behaviours are meaning that women are being forced down one route with algorithms and men are being forced down another. So even when organisations get it right and invest in technologies to ensure that there is an inclusive landscape so everyone sees the job, still don't see the job. So we're trying to work that out. Technology organisations are trying to work that out. Here's one way that can work: diverse hiring panels. So we take away the technology that everybody's been crying for and go to diverse hiring panels. Can absolutely drive much more diversity, but then you have people saying, but then we're going to be positively discriminating. That's when I start hitting my head against a wall, because you kind of go back and forth. But there has to be a story where organisations are saying, well, we're underrepresented in these groups and this is what we need to target so that we can round the circle, so that we're in a position where people see we have diversity of thought, diversity of creativity, because actually that makes us a better organisation. And there's so much data to prove that a diverse organisation performs much better from a results perspective than a non-diverse organisation. So tech can help eliminate hiring bias. I don't think it can do the job without human intervention. And we've seen that a number of times, particularly with the unconscious bias piece, where you pass job descriptions through technology, it raises a percentage rate of bias, and then you go and rewrite those elements. But if the people that are rewriting them are the people that don't think they have a problem, you then go round in this circle, which is deeply frustrating for everybody. So 50% of women in STEM have faced gender discrimination at work. You know, I live in central London. Recent news from the British Medical Council was, you know, really well felt. You know, the Metro led with front pages on sexual harassment, discrimination, women's ideas being, you know, put in the biscuit tin, you know, from the gentleman with incredibly expensive shoes and lovely pinstripe suits. And it created a really strong sense of discomfort and people asking lots and lots of questions. I think there's been some really good journalistic work there, but there's so much more work to do. And that comes down to all of us. It comes down to all of us rescinding permission and getting into a position where we feel we can and will fight and call out that behaviour. So again, you know, this is well publicised, and I think Rosalind Franklin Society have done some really good work in publicising some of this piece. I know we have a speaker either today or tomorrow talking around this subject. If I look at this from a STEM perspective and I look at an engineering environment, I'm 5'1". I was 5'2". It's kind of happening. You know, I'll be like this not long. At 17 years old, I joined the Royal Air Force to become a mechanical engineer. I was the only female on my flight. I was the only female through my education process, through basic training, technical training, and then into my squadron. And I dealt with this every single day. And what I dealt with is no different to what women deal with in labs and business every single day. Now the difference is, that was 1990 something, maybe, up until you know, the early 2000s. But it continues. And I don't think it's going to simply be eradicated. And this goes back to the point of early intervention. Can you stop it? Or are you just treating the output? So punishing people that are caught, that happens and there's public outcry, but it's not enough going on at the front end to make a real impact. 43% of women in STEM switch fields and leave the workforce or transition to either part-time or other work. And my sister-in-law is an amazing example of this. You know, she's a PhD. She spent a lot of time doing things to mice. I don't know if she was making them drunk, and I couldn't possibly pronounce what she was doing. But now she's the CEO of a fashion brand. You know, this amazing scientific mind that is now making dresses. Now, I don't want to devalue that, because it's amazing, it's what her purpose is and where she finds great joy. But blimey, it's a lot of money to spend on an education and not use it in the field that you chose to go into. And her mum and dad, I'm like, wow, you should get that money back. You know, get that money back. We'll have it, you know, from, you know what, like IVF treatment or something. If you're not going to use it, there should be like parent rules. If you're going to get an education and then not do it for your living, you should have to pay it back, I think. And not in student loan terms either. So how do women want to work? Now, this is a no-brainer for me. Fairness and respect, is it so big a thing to ask for? Do you think any guy goes to work every morning and says, today I'd like to experience fairness and respect? No, they do not. They expect it. But women expect to go to work and, you know, often have a pretty shitty day. And I don't think that's okay. A sense of value. Now, we know in the science and engineering spaces, your work is often not so valued. Or in most recent times, I can recall 2 or 3 times where some significant things happen and it's the guy that's wheeled out to talk about it. We want women's work to be valued and to be recognised and to be acknowledged on whatever stage that is, whether it's in a university, whether it's in a school, whether it's in a lab, or whether it's on the international stage. We want it to be recognised and valued. And I think somebody else this morning talked about, connecting to a higher purpose. Most people think about patient outcomes, people's well-being, making the world a better place when you make a choice to do what you do. And that's great. There is a great sense of purpose and intent that drives that behaviour, that drives you going through the education process, that drives you through those basement months, right, doing those repetitive tasks. We really want to see people able and given permission to connect to that higher purpose. A culture of collaboration. We know that breaks down often when women are involved in teams and they're kind of sidelined. We've read, and I've read most recently, scenarios of women being treated as administrators in teams, which is deeply, deeply frustrating for them. They're the ones, I'm seeing lots of nods over there, but, again, it's a permission piece, but I think it's very difficult for women in that situation to rise up and speak out because you're already being marginalised, so you speak and then what happens? It becomes a very closed shop. So we're trying to find ways within corporations, and some that we work with have really incredible schemes to give access to labs for people that are trying things out or going through funding processes so that they can have creative, open, inclusive places to work. And I want to see more of that. And this is the whole holy grail for women in STEM. A more flexible workplace, a more flexible environment, something that understands your parental responsibilities. And men need that too, by the way. This isn't just reserved to women. It's for parents or carers. You could be caring for a parent, but people don't really accept that. They don't really step back and say, oh, you're a carer. You need time out. You've got to have some more flexibility in your work. Learning and growing is, goes without saying, and I recall again on the panel this morning, we never stop learning. I have a limited capacity for learning, so you guys are much better at it than me, but learning and growing in an environment that encourages learning and growing is absolutely critical. And again, we know that customers are telling us that they don't think they're doing a good enough job in that space. So from a Kelly perspective, over the course of the day, we've probably connected 155 to 160 people within science and engineering to roles, either as a permanent employee or as a contingent worker, contractor, freelancer, temporary worker. So 56% of our total talent base is female. That's fairly even, and that goes to speak to the pipeline points that others have made today. 53% are science specialists, and I'm really, really proud of that. That's something that is a purposeful, intent-led activity for us to attract females and attract scientists so that we can engage them with fulfilling work and purposeful work with our many, many professionals are engineering. And I think that speaks to the volume of work we do in the healthcare and science piece. So it's relative and proportionate, but again, it's much, much higher than the national average. And I'm asking, and I have a cheeky way of asking it, but stop doing the same things, you will get the same outcomes. We've got to stop measuring outcomes in the way that we are and get to the inputs much earlier and help bridge the gap between learning and earning, bridge the gap that I don't know that anyone's owning really well, so that we're in a position to change the direction that we've been in for such a long time. So break the rules, be comfortable with them, take permission away from those that think they can carry on doing the same old thing and delivering the same outcomes. And I'm honoured to be amongst such clever people today and people that are making a difference and inventing things and helping people like me with my constant respiratory issues that are normally caught on aeroplanes. But if anyone can come up with a really solid thing for jet lag, I am all ears. Engage with talent early, tell stories, and from the stories I've heard today, you're not short of them. Let's get them out there and find really powerful channels to push them into workplaces, push them into people, and stamp out discrimination without giving people an opportunity to say, we can't positively discriminate, because I think that's an argument that sucks. And if we're smart about it and use data and people in the best way, we can create much better pathways for people of all backgrounds. We often say, what's next? We also say, ditch the script. I want to say thank you all for listening. If you have any questions, feel free. Yeah, I appreciate your time. Thank you.